Salams from the People's Dispatch studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani and you're watching Daily Debrief. Today we're talking about a dubious pre-poll alliance in the Philippines. We're talking about air pollution in New Delhi. We're talking about racism in Yorkshire cricket, or English cricket actually. And we're talking about a change in the color of the French flag. First up, the son of former Philippines dictator Ferdinand Marcos, unsurprisingly named Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and the daughter of current President Rodrigo Duterte, Sara Duterte, have officially announced an alliance as running mates for the upcoming general election. Marcos Jr. and Duterte Jr. will be contesting the two top posts of president and vice president, while Rodrigo Duterte has turned back on his retirement announcement earlier and will be contesting for a Senate seat. Sorry for that. While the Marcos family have supported the Duterte administration, the regime, this new alliance between the two marks a turning point in Philippines politics. Anish joins us now from People's Dispatch, who covers the Philippines. Anish, what do you make of this sort of controversial coming together of these two families that have a strong history in Philippines politics?
Yeah, in a sense, it's a coming together of legacies that are quite parallel in many ways in Philippines history. If you look at it, Duterte's war on drugs, his war on terror has actually claimed way too many lives. It has also led to violations of civil liberties and rights of all sorts you can think of. It is being investigated right now by the International Criminal Court, and it's a situation where it harks back to the same old martial law era that the Marcos dictatorship, is very much alive in Philippines memory. So in a sense, it's quite like a coming together of similar ideology, similar style of administration, and we have to also remember that unlike other dynasties where usually the next generation comes in much after their parents have passed their prime or are dead, here the next generation has always been part of their parents' administration, their politics. Sara Duterte, for instance, as mayor of Davao City, she's been the mayor after her father, has been one of the most vocal proponents of violent police raids and attacks on the communist, or all sorts of red tagging. There is something called as red tagging, where you call somebody communist. It's kind of like a McCarthyite policy that Philippines has. And and she has been one of those who actually never wanted peace, something that her father in fact went for, peace talks with the communists and repealing of martial laws. She was one of the biggest opponents of repealing of the martial law in southern Philippines. So in a way, this is sort of like a continuation of a legacy or a set of legacies, but in a more expanded form. And in some ways, Sara Duterte kind of represents that sort of adrenaline, steroid-filled right-wing politics that Philippines hasn't seen yet. We have to understand that, like, as much as Duterte has been criticized for his politics, it is not the same that Sarah really wants to go for. And for Marcos Jr., for instance, he's no different. If you remember, there was a time in the presidency, at the very twilight days of the presidency, when Marcos Jr. actually suggested an army attack on a major protest camp, which could have led to violence, injuries, and even deaths of many unarmed citizens. Something that his father had to shoot down. So these are people who can be unhinged when the time comes, or when they're pushed to the corner. So this sort of they are obviously coming from that legacy, but they're also building something more extreme and pushing Philippines to a more extreme sort of political situation from now on.
And so what sort of resistance is being mounted to all of this march towards the right?
In a way, the certain social movements, you can divide it between social movements and the opposition parties, right? So the opposition parties are kind of divided among themselves. You have two major opposition figures right now, still, each contesting individually as for the presidential post, and they are still far behind the Sara Duterte and Marcos Jr. combined. So it is not going. It is going to be very difficult for them to, unseat this kind of coalition right now, considering all the opinion polls that we have seen since for more than a year, actually. And at the same time, you have the social movements actually working to secure whatever little rights you can, and also try to frustrate this sort of political uh, movement, as you said, towards the right for the Philippines. So one of that is two petitions that are now been filed with the Election Commission, which is pointing out Marcos Jr.'s 1995 conviction in a tax fraud case. And in that, the way rule stands right now, anybody who has been convicted of those crimes cannot run for any federal post. But since then, Marcos Jr. has been a governor of a state. He has been a House representative and a Senate. His last electoral stint as in a federal post was in 2016. So for some reason, the Election Commission has overlooked this, the conviction that still stands, which has not been shut down by any of the higher courts or higher judiciary. He, in fact, himself withdrew from an appeal again in the Supreme Court against the conviction. So the conviction is still there. So for some reason, it never came up as an election issue so far, but it is now coming up. There will be a hearing on 26th. Not much hope we can invest on this hearing, but there is definitely a slim chance on that. But on the other hand, movements are trying to push for rights of human rights defenders. Now, this is a bill that is in the Congress that has been tabled in the Congress very successfully, and social movements are trying to push for that, basically to prevent extrajudicial killings, red tagging. The Duterte regime has actually created multiple apparatus of state to crack down on activists, claiming them to be communist fronts, and not just activists like social activists and civil rights movements, but also church groups, their orphanages, schools, even
all
pantry.
elements of civil society.
Exactly. So basically, anything that can challenge the state's power at this point is being shut down or cracked down upon, and this includes like even heavily corporatized media that the Philippines has. We saw that in the ABS, CBN, withdrawal of their license, of their broadcasting license. And so this sort of thing needs to be curbed. And this is something that the civil society will be pushing for in the coming days. There will obviously be campaigns trying to go against the duo's presidential bid. It is essentially a combined presidential bid. Right. So in a sense, we can hope for bigger resistance. There was already a movement, a protest demonstration on Sunday this week, days before this announcement was made. Yeah. But we can expect more such demonstrations and protests coming in the next few months until May, when the elections are due.
Fair enough. Thanks for that update, Anish. Moving on now to Delhi pollution. Over the past couple of weeks, in fact, we've been talking about India's role in the global climate negotiations that were held in Glasgow that have concluded. But today we're talking about a situation on the ground in this country. India's Supreme Court today reproached the inertia of the bureaucracy in dealing with the crisis. Schools, colleges and libraries have been ordered shut, and government departments have been put on work from home mode. The Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramanna, heading a special branch comprising Justices D.Y. Chandrachud and Suryakant, questioned the efficacy of the steps taken by the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region and adjoining areas during an emergency meeting held to bring down the levels of pollution that we are seeing and experiencing. We had the opportunity earlier to speak to Anumita Roy Chaudhary of the Center for Science and Environment for a data-based analysis of what's going on.
So what we have done, because now at least one good thing about Delhi is some more data is available. It is the science has emerged to tell us more clearly where is the pollution coming from. So there is this support system, data support system that has been created by the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, IITM. And what they do is actually on an hourly basis. they model estimates based on all the techniques that they have developed and based on the data that they have access. So they model estimates to show that how relative contribution of different pollution sources are constantly changing in the city, and where is it all coming from. They have classified these sources, one from those coming from outside Delhi, because pollution does not follow administrative boundary; it blows between boundaries. So the what is the outside? And outside means from the larger NCR, and they have considered about 19 districts of NCR, right? And also biomass burning, which is the stubble burning in the neighboring states. So these are outside. And within the city, they have identified 8 more pollution sources, and which also showing that how the Delhi's local sources are contributing to pollution. So if you look overall, and we looked at that data, we looked at that hourly data that has continuously changed between October 24th and 8th of November. So this is the early winter phase, and this is the time when the pollution, the first season's first smog also built up. So what is fascinating to see that during this period, one, that the contribution from outside Delhi has also been very big. Okay, there have been days when the contribution from the NCR region, okay, has been more than 60%. Okay, so that's a very clear concern. But what we did, while we looked at the overall, so outside and inside, but we also wanted to know that what is Delhi's own problem. So we took out, excluded the outside, and we took the inside Delhi and looked at those 8 sources in Delhi. And when we compared that, that has showing that if you eliminate everything, the outside pollution, but look only at the local sources, then vehicles been dominating this entire period. If you work out the average, it's around half of where the pollution of Delhi. So that is really worrying. And then after vehicles, then you have these other sources. One, that it's even showing that solid fuel use in households. That's one big contributor. Industries, they have continued to remain a problem. Then construction and waste burning. And then comes whole range of other sources. So these are certainly the key, but vehicles, if they are 50% of the problem right now, then we really have to address that.
The CSE and other scientists in the field are raising several questions regarding the steps taken. Anumita also outlined those for us.
We are asking some very clear questions because the fundamental principle of pollution control is that you will have to cut emissions at the source of the pollution. If we have not been able to do that, then this kind of tailpipery, where you are trying to put a giant air purifier in outdoor conditions, and when the weather is extremely dynamic, okay, the wind is so dynamic, cause it's a billions of cubic meter of air that blows through the city, right? And the tonnage of pollution that is emitted by different sources in the city, like the recent study by Terry and ARAI shows that we generate about 3,200 tons of pollution. Now, how can you purify air and make an improvement in the ambient air quality? So we are asking questions, and we are saying because nowhere in the world we have seen application of smog tower as a regulatory measure. People do this more as a recreational measure, that they put them up in the parks and people just go and sit around it, and they just take the that's a kind of approach that you have. So where is and now that we have got these purifiers, so the only question that we are asking, that where is also the impact assessment, that what is there to show that in Anand Vihar, if you have the smog tower, then how it has helped to improve the ambient air. That is the fundamental question, because yes, if you put air through the purifier, what is going in is going to be dirty and what is coming out is going to get cleaned up. But that doesn't mean that you are cleaning up the ambient air of Delhi. And that is the more important issue for us. So where is that impact assessment done to show? And today, Anand Vihar continues to remain among the top 5 most polluted locations in the city. So therefore, from there, therefore, we are saying that let us understand that today it is important for Delhi to know that what are the gaps in action, because it's not that Delhi has not done anything so far. Delhi has actually done a lot which other cities have not done. But even after doing all of that and seeing a stabilization in the year on year basis pollution level, it has actually bent the pollution curve. But even after bending that pollution curve, where Delhi is today, it requires another close to 58% cut to be able to meet the clean air standards. Now, that's the fundamental issue that we really need to understand, that what has happened and what more needs to happen.
A little bit of news from the world of sport now. Former Yorkshire off-spinner Azim Rafiq has unequivocally voiced his experience of institutional racism in English cricket to a standing committee of the UK Parliament. NewsClick's Leslie Xavier is with us. Leslie, what's the story?
So Rafiq, again, in the last decade, he was considered one of the most promising upcoming cricketers in England, and he was the under-19 skipper. Under him, 3-4 of the current stars, including Joe Root, have played. And he joined Yorkshire in 2008, and from there till 2018, he had 2 stints there. The first stint, which saw him become the youngest skipper of Yorkshire. After his 2018 stint, after he wound up his stint in 2018, a couple of years later, in 2020, he came out alleging racism during his career in Yorkshire. And subsequently, many revelations, many interviews, including the one in front of the British Parliament committee, he has revealed in detail what exactly happened in the dressing room, in the circles, in the club, which more or less troubled him as a cricketer, also brought his morale, his psyche down, so much so that he has directly blamed it as being the one sole reason why he lost his career as a cricketer, as an elite cricketer. He was meant to be an elite cricketer. So his story, I mean, more or less is taken by the cricketing fraternity in England right now, including current players, as an episode which is so common in the country, in cricket. And it's so the English Cricket Board has taken action now, but it was actually sitting on it for the last couple of years, and they have banned Yorkshire from hosting international matches. That is one of the first moves that they made. Couple of sponsors of Yorkshire has pulled out from sponsorship deals. So repercussions are now slowly trickling in. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, a lot of progress has happened in this issue. But at the same time, it is a divided house in England.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, in fact, in the next question, which is basically that one side of the story is coming out and questioning Rafiq for going back for that second stint that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And that seems to be quite symbolic of the whole problem, in a way.
Symbolic of the whole problem, and also a question which the parliamentary committee shouldn't have asked, and they asked. So officially they asked. Like, I can understand the vagaries of social media and how things work there and how many people question such things. But MPs, I mean, they asked the question, and Rafiq had the answer. He said that at that point he was with Derbyshire,
right,
just before the stint began with Yorkshire again. And he said that it was a matter of bringing food onto the table. Derbyshire didn't have the resources to sustain his cricketing career, so he had to go back. And so that brings us that makes us ask the question, right? So racism, not racism, that's not the question here. It's about a human's right to earn a living decently. So that's beyond the question of why did you go, the people who are questioning him should also understand that where it comes from and where it all began. And so the commentators in the UK have I mean, who understand such aspects of this problem, because it has various layers. Racism in general has various layers and implications. So they have started talking about how it's not just about cricket here. It's also a larger problem that the society faces,
absolutely.
and it can be an office, it can be a bank, it can be even the British Parliament, and you are never immune from this, and that's how. So one of the reactions was top officials, top executives resigning from Yorkshire because of the club's stand. They are not willing to take action. And so, while resigning, one of the officials said that Yorkshire seems to be stuck in the past. But then the feeling now is that it's not the past. It's very much, pretty much in the present. This is 2021 British society we are talking about. That's and this feeling is coming from right from England.
Well put, Leslie. Finally, for someone who spent the past decade chanting Allez les Bleus at football grounds around the world, here's something that completely slipped my notice. France's President Emmanuel Macron ordered a change to the color of the national flag to echo the heroism of that country's past. Prashant, I don't think you need a second invitation to have a go.
No, absolutely. I'm even wearing blue for the question. So this is a really strange step. Apparently it took place last year. But the idea was that the color of the French flag should be turned a bit darker to reflect the revolutionary legacy. So as we know, the French Revolution, historic moment in France, and this flag was very central to that process, I mean, throughout the decades or the centuries. So there's this memory associated with this French flag. Now, on the other hand, there is in the 70s, what happened was that as France, was part of the European Union, there was an attempt, they lightened the flag, the blue color in the flag, to sort of bring it closer to the European flags. Right. That is considered a move of, towards to avoid a symbolic, so to speak. Yeah. Now, what for me stands out is a stark irony in the fact that Macron is basically trying to hark back to this glorious revolutionary past, considering the fact that his government has been brutal towards the people for whom the revolution took place, the French Revolution took place. It was for the poorer people, it was for the working people, right? Yeah. And then what happens is the French government attacks the Yellow Vest protesters over the past few years. It introduces pension reforms, which will destroy the livelihoods of many people. It tries to cut down on the rights of journalists and the media. And, a variety of policies which Macron has, implemented and which have been, condemned widely. And there have been regular protests by trade unions, by workers, by journalists, by all sections of society against these policies. So right now when Macron is doing this whole harking back to the revolution, it really, it's a bit too much, as we often say in this segment, because it's completely, again, it goes the revolutionary spirit which is being talked about. Yeah. Although he has not explicitly said so. Yeah. The revolutionary spirit which is talked about in the context of this color is the exact opposite of what Macron's policies are in almost every aspect of French life. So there are many people who see Macron as a more acceptable figure because, the opponents are so far to the right, extremists, like, say, Marine Le Pen, for instance, or the new candidate who's, Zemmour, who's appearing. But the fact nonetheless remains that Macron's time period has led to quite a bad situation for the workers of France, for the poor people of France, even for the middle class of France, a lot of whom, for instance, were part of the Yellow Vest protests. So I don't think, a lot of these people are really going to be amused. I don't think people who live the revolutionary legacy of 1789 and the 1830 and 1848 are really going to be amused by any of this. So one of those crazy moments again in world politics. Small incident, of course, but yeah.
But yeah. Small but noteworthy nevertheless, especially given the context of the elections, important elections that are coming up in France, which of course you will be covering closely for us. You've been watching Daily Debrief. This is People's Dispatch. You can get more on all of these stories from our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and follow us on all the regular social media channels. We'll be back again, same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.